Some patients walk into my office, and it's like all the air leaves the room. The weight of their life story fills the space. That's how it was with Trevor. Trevor was a 38-year-old man living alone. He kept rubbing his hands together, as if trying to clean something invisible. For 15 minutes he didn't speak, but he squirmed. His eyes welled up, but he couldn't cry. After 15 minutes his first sentence was, "I killed my son." We both paused. "Just like my father killed me, I killed my son too. But my son is in the ground and I'm still alive," he said, and began to cry out loud. This isn't Trevor's story. This is the story of how a child was slowly destroyed, and how that child, when he grew up, did the same thing to his own son. When Trevor was 5 years old, his father taught him something: making a mistake, suffering pain. But this wasn't a simple lesson. This was being locked in a basement, crying in the dark for hours, eventually sitting silent in his own filth. His eyes were empty as he remembered that moment. "The first time I knocked on the door," he said, "then I gave up." A 5-year-old child had learned to give up, but what he really learned was something else: being controlled, staying alive. And Trevor never forgot that lesson. In some sessions, my patients healed as they talked. But some stories, they never left my mind. Today, I'm gonna tell you one of those lives. If you're listening to this story and you have things you can't let go of, share in the comments where you're listening from and what's on your mind. I read every comment. I hear every story. If you want to hear about the next stories that have left a mark on me, don't forget to subscribe and turn on notifications. If this story touched your feelings, you can show it by liking. I'd love to hear your story someday too. If you want me to share your story in my next video, you can send it to the email address on my profile. Remember, some stories heal a little when they're shared. After Trevor cried, he was silent for a long time. He placed his hands on his knees, symmetrical. Perfect. Then he looked at me. Trevor didn't cry anymore, he just rubbed his hands. As I watched him, I noticed myself. I was clenching my hands too, as if his pain had filled the room and seeped into me. I took a breath. I need to be professional. But it was hard. His son Ethan was 3 years old when he died. The report said it was an accident, but Trevor knew the truth. He had known from the beginning that if he was given a child, he would kill that one too. But he had still wanted it because he thought maybe this time he would be different. Maybe he wouldn't be like his father. He was. He was worse. Trevor hadn't come here to confess. He had come to be punished. The court had found him innocent, but he was guilty. And as I listened to him, I realized something. He doesn't want to be forgiven. He wants to be punished, because punishment is at least familiar, the only thing he's known since childhood. When he was 5, he had a red toy truck. Shiny plastic, even the little wheels really turned. Trevor loved it, and this is where the first lesson began. Loving was dangerous. The thing you love would punish you. That day he was playing in the living room, driving his truck across the carpet. He got thirsty. He left the truck, just for a minute, and went to the kitchen. He drank water. As he was putting the glass on the counter, he heard heavy footsteps from the door. Just as he was about to turn back, he heard a crash. His father had tripped over the truck he'd left in the middle. Trevor still hears that sound 33 years later. Some sounds get carved into a child's brain and never leave. That sound was what split Trevor's life in two, before and after. His father called his name. The voice was calm, but Trevor knew that voice because a 5-year-old child may not know how to read yet, but had learned to decode tones. Which voice is danger? Which voice is punishment? Which voice is maybe, just maybe, survival? He had taken 7 steps from the kitchen to the living room. He had counted each one because counting gave him a sense of control. With tiny feet, measured steps, feeling his heart in his chest, he had walked toward his father. But the numbers didn't protect him. Because numbers can't protect a child from his father. They just make that moment bearable. His father showed him the truck and looked into his eyes and asked, "Where should this be?" Trevor looked at his father's feet in fear, said, "In the toy basket," but he had forgotten. He was 5 years old. He was a child. But for his father, this wasn't an excuse. He apologized, looking at the empty space on the floor. He begged, but none of this calmed his father's anger. His father grabbed his arm in anger, and as Trevor told me about that hand, he said he still felt the warmth of that hand on his arm, even 33 years later. His father grabbed him by the arm and dragged him toward the basement. And as I listened to him, I understand something. A child experiencing something like this at that age would destroy all sense of trust. He wouldn't be able to form closeness with anyone in the future. But I don't tell Trevor this, because he already knows. When I heard that word, basement, the air in the room suddenly got cold and heavy. Because that basement wasn't just a place. It was a punishment system, an educational tool, a method of breaking a child's soul. It was dark in there. So dark that Trevor couldn't see his hand even when he held it in front of his eyes. It was cold, damp. There was that old house smell in the air, mold, moisture, abandonment. It was a small room, it had concrete walls, and there was a bulb hanging from the ceiling, but his father didn't turn it on because darkness was part of the punishment. As I listened to him, for a moment I put myself in that child's place. 5 years old, in the dark, abandoned. But I don't tell Trevor this. I need to be professional. When the door closed, he heard the metal lock sound. That sound was the sound of a child's world closing. There was no more outside, there was only inside. And inside was dark. For the first half hour he sat in the corner, waited silently. He hoped his father would come back, maybe forgive him, a 5-year-old child's hope. He didn't come. He knocked on the door, first gently, then harder. He begged, cried, apologized over and over. But upstairs the television was echoing, very loud, loud enough to drown out Trevor's voice. At that moment Trevor understood. His father heard him but didn't want to hear. And that moment is worse than death for a child. To exist but not be seen, to make noise but not be heard. Sometimes silence is a child's loudest scream. His small fists hit the door, his hands hurt, then went numb, but no one came. Hours passed, and in the dark there was no such thing as time. There were only breaths. Trevor started counting them, because thinking hurt, but counting kept him alive. As I listened to him, I watch his hands. Now, in this room, 33 years later, his fingers are moving. In the same rhythm. 1, 2, 3, 4. At that moment I understand. He's still counting, he's still in that basement. That night Trevor found a friend, numbers. They wouldn't hurt, they wouldn't abandon, they were always there. Hunger came, thirst burned his throat, then he needed to pee and tried to hold it, but he was 5 years old. He wet his pants. Shame, smell, cold. He sat in his own filth and waited. 14 hours. An eternity for a 5-year-old child. Every second a lifetime. Every minute an age. In the morning when his father opened the door, light poured in and hurt Trevor's eyes. Then he saw the disgust on his father's face. And as I listened to him I think, a father looking at his own child like that is the most cruel way to kill that child. What did you learn? His father asked, but Trevor couldn't speak because his mouth was bone dry. What did you learn? He asked again, harder this time. Trevor whispered, I'm sorry. But it wasn't enough. I'm sorry, Dad, he repeated, crying, begging. 33 years later, Trevor is still repeating that apology, as if his father is still standing there, as if he still needs to say it loud enough, as if he'll be saying that apology for the rest of his life. When he was allowed to leave, his legs wouldn't hold him because his circulation had stopped. He crawled out, climbed the stairs, and every step was torture. His mother was in the kitchen. She had heard everything, the crying, the begging, the knocking on the door. But she hadn't done anything. No, I said that wrong. She had done something once. As Trevor told me this, his voice changed. One night, before his father came home from work, his mother had secretly gone down to the basement. She had a glass of milk in her hand. She hadn't opened the door but tried to push the glass under the door. Trevor had seen that glass. He had seen his mother's hand. It was trembling. At that moment, Trevor understood. His mother loved him. But she was afraid. Then a sound came from upstairs. What are you doing there? His mother had gotten up in panic, left the glass and gone upstairs. His father had seen her. He had yelled. He had hit her. That night, Trevor couldn't reach the glass, because it had stayed under the door outside, but he had seen that hand, his mother's trembling hand. At that moment he learned something. Protectors were helpless too. Love wasn't enough. Fear conquered everything. And as I listen to him I think, maybe his mother's most cruel mistake wasn't helping. It was not being able to help. Because for a child, to see his mother's love but not be able to receive it. This is perhaps more painful than never seeing it at all. That no, that word describing his mother doing nothing, echoes in my room for a long time. But now it echoes differently. Because Trevor had been abandoned, not just by his father, but by his mother's helplessness. One was hurting him, the other was too broken to be unable to hurt. And for a child, both are the same thing, being abandoned. That night in his bed he noticed he was counting his breaths. He didn't know why, but it gave him a sense of control. Numbers were now friends, the only friends. And as I listened to him, I understand. Trevor had learned something else that night. The world was dangerous, people would hurt, but numbers were reliable. A week later it happened again. Milk spilled at dinner. It was an accident. His hand had hit the glass. His father got up without saying anything and took him to the basement. This time, 12 hours. Trevor didn't knock on the door anymore. He just sat in the corner and counted. His breaths, his heartbeats, the seconds. A month later, he brought home a bad grade. He got a 7 out of 10 on a math test. His father wanted 8. The basement again. 16 hours. As Trevor tells me these, he lists them like items. Basement, basement, basement. As if it's a normal thing. As if every child has a basement in their life. At that moment I realize, for Trevor this was normal. This was his childhood. But as I listen I get angry, an unprofessional anger. Locking a 5-year-old child in a basement isn't normal. Leaving him hungry for 14 hours isn't normal. But Trevor didn't know this, because this was all he knew. By the time he was 7, he had become a different child. He didn't talk at school. He would freeze when the teacher asked a question, because the wrong answer meant the basement. Every question was a danger, every answer was a risk. He would sit alone during recess. Count. The birds, the clouds, the voices of other children. Because numbers were safe. One day in class, a child bumped into him. An accident. But Trevor's notebooks fell to the floor, the pages scattered. Trevor's heart started racing. He gathered the notebooks, tried to straighten the pages, but the corners were creased now. When he got home, his father noticed. He wanted to see the notebook. Trevor gave it. His hands were trembling. His father opened the notebook, saw the creased corner. He didn't ask anything. He just took Trevor to the basement. This time Trevor didn't make a sound. He just sat and counted. The basement was now Trevor's normal life. It was expected. The dark was always the same. The cold was always the same. The pain was always the same. At least there were no surprises. And as I listen to him, I think, for a child, predictable pain is safer than unexpected love. When he was 8, something happened at school. There was a boy named Kyle, older, 10 years old. He would take money from other kids, beat them. One day Kyle noticed Trevor, alone, quiet, defenseless. He came to him at lunch. Trevor paused as he remembered that moment. For a long time, he held his breath. Kyle took him to the bathroom. Trevor stopped. There was silence. I wait. I don't push. Then he said this. Kyle did something to me. He didn't give details, but he doesn't need to. The emptiness in his eyes tells everything. Kyle threatened him. If you tell, I'll tell everyone, he said. When he got home, he didn't say anything, because if he told, he thought maybe they would blame him. Maybe his father would get angrier. Maybe the basement would be longer. Or, worse, maybe they wouldn't believe him. An 8-year-old child. Being abused, staying silent because there was no safety at home, because there was no protector at home. There was only the basement. Kyle called him every day. Trevor went every day. Until high school graduation. 4 years. Father at home, Kyle at school. There was no safe place. Nowhere. And as I listen to him, I think, Trevor's trauma wasn't a single event. It was in layers. Father, basement, Kyle, mother. Each one had been built on top of the previous one. Each one had destroyed Trevor a little more. Trauma upon trauma. Pain upon pain. When he was 11, he saw his mother one night. She was sitting on the bed. She had a pill bottle in her hand. She was taking too many pills. Trevor didn't say anything. He just watched. Then he went back to his room. Because intervening was dangerous. Making noise meant punishment. An 11-year-old child watched his mother go toward death and stayed silent. When his mother didn't wake up in the morning, Trevor called 911. The ambulance came. His mother survived. At the hospital, his father looked at him. This is your fault, you're stressing her out, he said. Trevor believed it. 33 years later, he still believes it. Telling a child your mother's suicide is your fault is another way to kill that child. His mother came home. But she was different now. She was taking medication. She wasn't talking. Her eyes were empty. Trevor took care of her at 11 years old. He cooked, he gave her medication. He became his mother's caregiver. When he was 14, it happened again. The water sound in the bathroom didn't stop. Trevor opened the door. His mother was in the tub. Her wrists were cut. The water was red. He called 911, but this time his mother didn't survive. She died, Trevor said. 2 syllables. Emotionless, as if he was saying something else. As I listen to him, I think, what does a child feel when they find their mother's body? But I don't see anything in Trevor. Emptiness, because his emotions had been killed. At 5 years old, in that basement. He didn't cry at the funeral. His father didn't cry either. You'll be strong now, his father said. No more weakness. Trevor said yes, a 14-year-old child, who found his mother's body, who couldn't cry. Because crying was weakness. And weakness meant punishment. He finished high school. He didn't talk to anyone. He lived alone. He lived with numbers. He studied accounting in college. Numbers, order, control. At 20 he was fired from his first job. Too slow. He would check the same numbers for hours. His father said you're useless. Trevor believed it. At 24 he met Emma. She smiled at him. Trevor fell in love. For the first time someone was kind to him. They got married. But Trevor started controlling her. Where she went, who she saw, what she did. He checked her phone. He blocked her friends. I'm protecting you, he said. Emma said, you've imprisoned me? She left. Then came Rachel, compliant, obedient. She allowed the control. They got married. Ethan was born. Trevor loved him insanely. For the first time in his life he felt real love. But his love was poisonous. Because he didn't know love. He only knew control. He controlled what Ethan ate. How much he slept. Even his breathing. He recorded everything. He measured everything. He counted everything. When Ethan got sick, Trevor panicked. He didn't take him to the hospital. Because he didn't trust doctors. He only trusted himself. He treated him at home. He gave him the wrong medicine. He calculated the dosage wrong. Ethan got worse. Trevor gave more medicine. He controlled more tightly. He counted more. Ethan died. 3 years old. The weeks after Ethan's death were a blur. Police interviews, social services, lawyers, everyone asking the same questions. Did you know the supplements were dangerous? Why didn't you take him to the hospital sooner? Were you trying to hurt your son? No, Trevor wanted to scream. I was trying to save him. I was trying to keep him safe. I was trying to be different from my father, but he was silent. Just like in the basement. Just like always. The court ruled it accidental death. Negligent homicide charges were considered, but ultimately dropped. He was trying to help his son, the judge said. Misguided but not malicious. Trevor walked out of the courthouse a free man. But freedom felt like the basement. Dark, cold, suffocating. Rachel had already filed for divorce. She didn't attend the hearing. Trevor signed the papers alone in a lawyer's office. His hands shook so badly he could barely write his name. Are you all right? The lawyer asked. Trevor nodded. But he wasn't. He would never be all right again. For 3 months, Trevor didn't leave his apartment. He called in sick to work until they fired him. He stopped answering the phone, stopped checking email, stopped eating regular meals. He would sit on the couch and stare at Ethan's room. The door was closed. He couldn't open it, couldn't pack it up, couldn't make it disappear. At night, he would dream. Always the same dream. He was in the basement again, 5 years old, knocking on the door. But when the door opened, it wasn't his father. It was Ethan, 3 years old, looking up at him. Daddy, I'm scared, Ethan would say. I know, I'm sorry. Why didn't you save me? I tried to save you. But you hurt me instead. Trevor would wake up screaming, hands rubbing together, cleaning. One night he opened the medicine cabinet, looked at the bottles. It would be easy, so easy. Just take them all. Go to sleep. Thus never wake up. Be with Ethan again. His hands reached for the first bottle. Then he saw it. His own reflection in the mirror. Hollow eyes, gaunt face, his father's face. He dropped the bottle. It shattered on the floor. Pills everywhere. Trevor slid down to the ground and wept. For the first time since the funeral, he cried. Really cried. Not the controlled tears of the courtroom, not the silent tears of the basement, but loud, ugly, broken sobbing. I'm sorry. He whispered to the empty bathroom. Ethan, I'm so sorry. The pills stayed on the floor for 3 days. Trevor stepped around them, looked at them, but didn't touch them. On the 4th day he cleaned them up, one by one, counting each pill as he picked it up. 73 pills. 73 ways to end it. But he didn't. Instead, he picked up the phone and called a number he'd found weeks ago. A therapist, Dr. Sarah Mitchell. I need help, he said when she answered. I killed my son. There was a pause. Then, can you come in tomorrow? Yes. Okay, I'll see you at 2. Trevor hung up. He sat on the floor, and for the first time in months, he felt something other than pain. He felt hope, small, fragile, barely there. But it was something. That's how Trevor ended up in my office. That's how we got here. As I listen to the end of his story, I watch him carefully, the hands that haven't stopped moving through our entire session, the eyes that can't quite meet mine, the shoulders that carry 33 years of weight. Trevor, I say gently, can I tell you what I see? He nods. I see a man who was tortured as a child, who learned that love meant pain, who learned that trust meant betrayal, who learned that the only way to survive was to control everything. I pause, and I see a man who loved his son so much that he destroyed him trying to protect him. Not because you're evil, not because you're your father, but because no one ever taught you what love actually looks like. Trevor's hands stop. He looks up at me. Love isn't control, I continue. Love is trust. Love is letting go. Love is accepting that you can't prevent all pain, and you never learned that. How could you? Your father taught you the opposite. Kyle taught you the opposite. Your mother's suicide taught you the opposite. Every person who was supposed to love you taught you that love means suffering. Tears are running down Trevor's face now. So when Ethan came along, you did the only thing you knew how to do. You tried to control everything. You tried to prevent all pain. You tried to keep him safe the only way you'd ever learned. I leaned forward. But Trevor, here's what I need you to understand. Ethan's death was not murder. It was a tragedy. It was the inevitable result of trauma that was never healed, of wounds that were never treated, of a child who grew up in a basement and never really left. Trevor is sobbing now. Full, body-shaking sobs. It's not your fault, I say softly. What your father did to you, not your fault. What Kyle did to you, not your fault. Your mother's death, not your fault. And Ethan was not your fault either. But I killed him, Trevor chokes out. No, your trauma killed him. The basement killed him. Your father killed him. You were just the vessel, the weapon, not the murderer. Trevor shakes his head. That doesn't make it better. No, I agree. It doesn't. Nothing makes it better. Nothing brings Ethan back. But understanding it, that's the first step to making sure it doesn't destroy anyone else, including you. We sit in silence for a long time. The only sound is Trevor's breathing, ragged, uneven. But there. I don't know how to live with this, he finally says. I know, but you're going to learn. We're going to learn together. How? One day at a time, 1 hour at a time, one breath at a time. Trevor looks at me. That sounds like what I did in the basement. Yes, I say. Exactly like that. You survived the basement 1 breath at a time. Now you're going to learn to live 1 breath at a time. Same skill, different purpose. Something shifts in his expression. Not peace, not forgiveness, but understanding maybe. I'm scared, he whispers. I know, being scared means you're alive. It means there's still something in you worth saving. Is there? I look at him, really look at him, past the trauma, past the pain, past the guilt. Yes, I say firmly, there is. At the end of the session that day, Trevor asked me a question. Can you save me? I was silent for a long time. I looked at him. That emptiness was still in his eyes, but there was something else. Small, fragile hope. Trevor, I said, when you were 5 years old, you were locked in a basement. You stayed there for 14 hours, in the dark, alone, abandoned. But in that darkness, you did something. You breathed. You counted. You survived. When no one protected you at 8, when you found your mother's body at 14, when you lost your son at 38, each time, somehow, you made it to morning. I paused. I looked at him, into his eyes. You know, Trevor, I work with people every day. Some of them experienced 1/10 of what you went through and collapsed. But you didn't collapse. You broke, yes. You were destroyed, yes. But you're sitting here, you're looking at me, you're still breathing. This isn't a coincidence. This shows there's something in you. So small, buried so deep that even you've forgotten. But it's still there. That 5-year-old child, when he was counting his breaths in that darkness, he wasn't just fighting to survive but to live. And he won. Because you're still here. I leaned forward a bit more. My voice softened. Now I'm going to tell you this, and I want you to listen very carefully. Ethan's death is not your fault. Surviving despite your father is not your fault. Not knowing how to love is not your fault. These are the consequences of what was done to you. And consequences are not choices. There was silence. Trevor's hands were trembling. But now, I said, now you have a choice. Your first real choice. You can continue to stay in that basement because it's familiar, because it's safe, because pain is at least predictable. Or you can walk to the door, and this time, there's someone to open the door. I'm here, Trevor. I'm holding the door. You just have to walk. 7 steps. Just like when you were 5. But this time there's light at the end. I paused, I took a breath. Will it hurt? Yes, because when you come out of that darkness, your eyes will burn. You'll cry, you'll scream, maybe you'll crawl. I'll be there, at every step, at every fall, at every retry. Because Trevor, you're not alone anymore, and accepting that might be the bravest thing you've ever done. I fell silent, and waited. You know how to survive. Now it's time to learn how to live. And I promise you, living is more beautiful than surviving. His eyes filled. For the first time that day he really cried. But this time it was different. This time he didn't try to control it. He just cried. And as I watched him I thought, maybe saving isn't the right word. Maybe just showing him he's not alone is enough. Trevor continues coming to our sessions. He still rubs his hands. He still counts. But now sometimes I see something in his eyes. Something small, fragile, maybe hope, maybe just exhaustion. But something is there, and I continue to listen to him. Because sometimes listening is the most powerful thing you can do for a person. When Trevor was 5 years old, no one listened to him. When he was 8, no one protected him. When he was 14, no one held him. But now he's 38, and I'm here. Listening. Is this enough? I don't know, but it's all I can do. Some wounds don't heal, they just move. Trevor's wounds are still there, still bleeding. But maybe, just maybe, he's not alone anymore. Because some stories heal a little when they're shared. And Trevor's story isn't just his anymore. It's yours too. And mine. All of ours. This story made me rethink some things. Every life, even with its pain, teaches a person something. Maybe this story reminded you to look at your own life, your feelings, or those around you with different eyes. I hope this story helped you understand yourself and others. I'd love to hear something about you in the comments, to get to know you and your story a little better. If you want to share what's on your mind, you can write to the email address on my profile. And if this story touched you, don't forget to like the video and subscribe. To be notified about the next real-life story, you can click the bell icon to turn on notifications.